Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Ryan Carey on the line. Ryan, how are you today?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself and the work you do, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Absolutely. So, hi everybody. I'm Ryan, and I'm the founder and CEO of BetterOn. And BetterOn is all about helping professionals and leaders show up better on camera, at the office, on a stage, wherever they are. Our focus is building the muscle of presence, authentic presence, executive presence, and how we do that is through video. We have a asynchronous video-based platform that participants go through and do the hard work of watching themselves to see what their audiences get, who the people that they want to connect with get, and try and improve.
That's important work because when people, I know a lot of people are deathly afraid of public speaking. I've shared on my show many times how I got over my fear of public speaking. It was chicken pox at age 21. So, but that's a funny story. If we have time, I'll share that. But ultimately, it's not only from a presence standpoint, but also a confidence in knowing your stuff. Because when you're giving a talk, a speech, or a presentation, whatever, maybe even a 2-minute meeting with the CEO, or your boss's boss's boss kind of thing. That presence is important because then it shows that you are confident in your own skin. You understand what you're sharing, the information you're providing, which then resonates, and they recognize as the receiver, okay, this person is confident about this. They seem to know what they're talking about. I can trust them with this. And then, of course, that can lead to all kinds of different things, not just from an internal standpoint, but when you're giving presentations to an external stakeholder, whether it's a funding body or a potential customer or a client or whomever. It's one of those things, you learn this. It has a huge ripple effect on every aspect of your life. For me, being a public speaker and doing all the work that I've done over the years, I can strike up a conversation with anybody in the elevator where a lot of people are kind of timid. They're looking at their phones and all of that. I can talk to anybody about anything. And I'm not afraid to do so. If they're open to it, great. If they don't want to talk, awesome. I get that. But it's one of those things where it becomes part of your life when you get really good at it. So I always recommend people to do the work. And I love the fact that your organization actually helps people in teams with that.
Yeah. It's, I think what I've learned, one of the many things I've learned along this journey is that in those moments that you describe, you know, whether it's high stakes or a big audience or whatever it is, people often tend to get a little bit smaller than they're used to being. They might, fall back a little bit instead of bringing more. And it's all about energy. And I think, like you're saying, knowing yourself, knowing what energy you want to bring, what energy you're capable of bringing, and kind of aspirationally how you want to show up. Anybody has the power to grow exponentially in that space, but it's this oftentimes challenging, painful, hard work of observing yourself to really get to the other side of that.
Yeah, and that's again one of those things that people, for some reason, they don't like how they look and they don't like how they sound. And I tell people, you're going to have to get over that at some point because you're not going to spend any more time with anybody else on this planet than yourself. So you got to figure out, at least tolerate yourself, ideally love yourself. I mean, you really, be the champion of you. Say, I'm freaking awesome. I love myself. It's like, I'm glad I don't have to buy shampoo anymore. Anything like that. It's, and I always say this to people. I really wish I would have invested all the money I used to spend on shampoo. I'd be a lot more wealthy than I am right now. But, you live and you learn. There's never too late to start. But again, it just has this ripple effect in every aspect of your life. You're like, okay, now I can give presentations at work. And a lot of people just think, okay, that's it. But that opens up doors, because if you get really good at something, then let's say maybe you're one of those people that aren't necessarily happy where you're working. There's apparently, tens of millions of people that are in that boat right now, it seems like, from all the stats and reports I see. By getting really good, leveraging training like this to be a better presenter, be able to command yourself. And I love how you said, don't shrink yourself. Don't, and I encourage this all the time. I talk to my kids about this and everybody else, like, don't diminish yourself. You go in that room as if you own that room. That's your room. Even if you're just an attendee and you're not speaking, you're not up on stage or anything, walk in that room like that is your room. It doesn't mean you need to be a jerk, but be confident about that, because you're there because you belong there, and you need to get, and do the work to figure out, okay, why do I feel like I don't belong there? And that's where imposter syndrome comes in. And so when you can work with therapy or coaches, or get guidance from people, because you do belong there. Your
Right.
insight and your viewpoints and your skills and your background are needed, because we're all different. We all have different things that we bring to the table that's a little bit different than somebody else. And that little difference can make a gigantic difference in an organization's life, an individual's life, you name it. So don't show up small. Go big, bold. So shout out to Mr. Bold, a colleague of mine. But you have to really, really take ownership of it. And I see this time and time again with organizations and individuals that are stressed or burned out, whatever. And time again, people want to delegate their self-care outside of themselves and their self-improvement and their professional development. The company's going to do that. You know what? A lot of companies, for whatever reason, might be financial, it might be they just don't want to do it. They don't invest in their employees as much as they could or should, depending on who you talk to. So it's on you. Learn how to be the best version of you. Because if you do that, then there is no limit to your growth. The only limit is time. It's really just, go after it. Learn, take advantage of, things like this. Talk to your company and say, hey, I just learned about a service that I heard on the Breakfast Leadership Show that could really help all of us be better at work, which again, it just, if you improve everybody at work, the work improves. What you do for your customers improve, your company improves, you grow. It, it's easy to do, but unfortunately, it's also easy not to do.
I love that what you said about delegating self-care, or even like outsourcing it. I think what we're talking about here, you just can't. It is an individual choice. It's an individual growth opportunity. And of course you can get help like what we're talking about, but the actual work that's going to get somebody to ideally, change a behavior, like that is yours alone. And I think what I've learned on this journey of kind of, when I started the company, leadership development was not, and like that was not what I was going for. But by doing it more and more, I was sort of told by people like, "Hey, this is leadership development." So I was like, "Okay, great." So I sort of have learned a lot um, along that road. But even though it falls under often professional development, leadership development offered by an entity, it still is that self work. So it can be kind of, like a gray zone of like, wait, what are we doing here? Am I being better on behalf of the company? Am I being better for myself? And I tell everybody, look, this is great. Your company's giving this to you. This is for you, because you're not your role. You're not your job. But so let's look at you, and then we can grow from there.
And I think that's a good way to hammer it home too, is you look at the opportunities you have. And most organizations, unless they're like, a two-person shop, they may not have, the budget for any type of leadership or professional development. Again, that's why YouTube University, folks, there's it's the cost of your internet connection. You can learn just about anything. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that what you're watching is accurate. Do some due diligence, because you could learn something. So okay, this is how to make a cake. And then everybody's going, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and buy you an easy bake oven, because you're going to have a better likelihood of making something that's somewhat edible. Finally got rid of that sandy taste that my kids made me a cupcake, 20 something years ago. It's like, you're missing something in here. It's a little sandboxy here. It's okay. You didn't take the sand from the sandbox, right? Okay, because there's cats that use that too. I don't want to do that. But again, there's the opportunities there, and when you run into it, and this is a good segue into asking some questions about some of the things that you see with people, especially when they're first starting to utilize your services. What are some of the things? Maybe it's the limiting beliefs that they have, or some of the things that they're struggling with at first, but then you see them overcome them, and all of a sudden they just start shining, and you see them bringing out a version of themselves that has been in them all the whole time, maybe suppressed, they didn't believe it, or it wasn't really refined so much. But what are some of the common things you see when you first start working with some of your clients?
I think one of the most common patterns that we see, and as I mentioned, we use video as a mirror for people to observe themselves. And we try to be as specific as possible so people know what they're getting into. And a lot of people say, "Yeah, I want to get better with my presence." But when they show up on day one and it's game time and they hit record, they're like, "Whoa, I did not know I'd be staring myself down, sitting by myself from wherever I am." And I think a lot of people, no matter what you do or what your level is, a lot of people have never seen themselves because it's not the top of people's lists. They don't wake up and they're not excited to be like, "You know what? I'm so excited. Today I'm going to drink some coffee. I'm going to watch myself on video." And the only other time people do often see themselves is when they're brushing their teeth. And that's it. So it's really a choice. So it's a choice to do this. So I think when people do, and I take it very seriously because safety and privacy is everything to how we approach this work. Because when you are allowed to sit with someone, so our team works privately with whoever works with BetterOn and offers them feedback. We go back asynchronously. Um, when you are in that kind of sacred place of not only observing somebody or observe themselves, but hear their reflection on what they see, it's all the warts. It's all the warts that people have lived with their whole lives, unless they've done something about it. So, and that's not everyone, but some people, once they get over the hump and they're like, "Oh man, I don't, I don't suck, or I'm not this story that I've told myself I was." And we give them a little bit of not BS support, but just kind of like, "Yeah, you're where you are for a reason, but you can go bigger." I think it's these like micro steps of empowerment that people are like, "Okay, instead of being afraid of myself, I'm going to embrace myself and I'm going to think aspirationally and start to try." Because when people don't know what they're working with, when they don't know what their audience gets, they have no frame of reference. So when you give them something to work with, they're like, "Oh, wait a minute. So if I try this, or if I try, 50% more than I usually do, I'm going to be exhausted. I'm going to feel uncomfortable." But man, the audience gets some real inspiration or gets something from me. So that's kind of the like typical pattern we see.
Yeah, and definitely I'll share that chicken box story real quick.
Oh yeah.
So I was in college and I had a fear of public speaking, and I had a business writing class, and I had a presentation. I don't remember what the presentation was about, but it was on there. I knew it was on there. It was a huge part of my grade. And if you don't pass that, you don't pass the class. So and this was a required class for the degree. So I'm like, dreading it the whole time. And it was in, the spring of, session and whatnot. And I was 21 at the time, and my brother was 16 at the time. And neither one of us had chicken pox as a kid. We only had everything else, but we never had that. And he somehow picked them up. And then on the last day that I could get them, I did. And so I had them everywhere but my feet. I'll let your imagination run there for a moment. It was not a comfortable experience, and I looked horrible. swollen red, just it looked like I had the worst acne on the planet, just did not look good. So I was quarantined during a week. And ironically, I was an accountant, so I worked at a CPA firm, and that was tax season. So I was quarantined for a week from tax season. The partners were not pleased by any stretch, but here, I couldn't come in. So thankfully, I get over that, get past the quarantine period, call the professor, because I was supposed to give my presentation during the week that I was off. I said, all right, when I come back, I'll give the presentation. Okay. So, I go into class, I still looked horrible. I walk in campus just looking, atrocious, and, people are looking, they're making comments, giggling, gasping, the whole gambit. And I walk into the class, and the classroom's kind of looking at me, and they're like, and I told them, I said, don't worry, I'm not contagious. Everything's good. And I sat down, and the professor came in, looked at me, and said, Mike, can you come out in the hallway for a second? And yeah. And she said, okay, look, you don't have to do this. I will give you a grade C. You'll pass the class. You're doing well, everything else. So you won't get an A in the class, but you'll pass. So you don't have to worry about it. You're not worried about a perfect grade point average, right? And I'm like, no. I was like, I'm still going to graduate with honors. I'm not worried about that. And I told her, I said, look, I've been dreading this for 2 months, and I've had to wait for the last week knowing that I had to do this. I need to do this for me. So she said, okay, let's do it. So I gave the presentation. At the end of it, the class gave me a standing ovation. Now, now I know that my talk was not that good. I know it wasn't. And the professor asked, why did you give Mike a standing ovation? And they said, if he can go up in front of us looking like that and give a presentation, he deserves a standing ovation. And that's where my fear of public speaking died. And it was one of those things. So I don't recommend people getting chicken pox, especially as an adult, to get over your fear of speaking. But it reminded me of the power of being present, even in a situation where you might not be comfortable. And in many cases, and when you're learning how to present and all that, you might be presenting some information that is not comfortable to share. It's not like, here's some presentation of how we're doing in Q3, and we're going to do this, and here's all the new initiatives, rah, rah, everybody's happy. Now, sometimes you have to give presentations that are not fun to give. And it was one of those experiences in my life that I'm thankful for. Because it allowed me to recognize, okay, I can give, information that's either good, bad, or indifferent, because I know that I have the confidence to be able to do it, and I'll check myself in the mirror. Okay, I don't have chicken pox today. Okay, we're good. We can go. But that is just, I love sharing that story because it helps people you can get through this. Yeah, I know it can be scary, intimidating, but you have it within you. Believe in yourself. And I think that's, one of the beautiful things about what you do is you show those people, and then they kind of get more comfortable with themselves. And if they do that, that can improve their relationships. If they're dating, maybe a little bit more confidence in their dating, improve friendships, work relationships, you name it. It's a win-win across the board.
I have a question for you about that chickenpox moment. So, I mean, it sounds like a very powerful moment. After that, was it big enough where you're like, I want to keep doing this? Or was it, did time kind of pass and you kind of went through life and had to do some public speaking here and there? Or did it really turn on like a light for you?
Well, for me, as far as my keynote talks and things like that, I started doing that several years later. But
Yes.
there was probably within the last, or maybe 2 or 3 years after that, I had to give some presentations here and there, and I felt that nervousness that I used to feel, but I went, wait a minute, remember the chicken pox? Oh yeah. And then I got better at it, but it improved my, working with senior leaders. And I was, I went to work for another CPA firm for a period of time, and the partners there were really rigid and, hard to approach and all that, but it gave me that confidence, because a lot of people say, well, don't go talk to him. And I'm like, I'm going to talk to him.
Yeah.
His door's open. I'm going to knock on the door. Hey, do you have a second? I'm going to talk to him. A lot of people are like, oh, don't bug him. Like, I'm going to bug him until they tell me don't bug him. And you're telling me not to bug him. You're not my boss. So I'm going in there and I'm going to have a conversation with him. And went in, and Eli was very open and transparent, and had a great conversation, had great relationship with him. A lot of people were like, it's like, and I'm like, why are you afraid of this guy? It's like, I'm like, and I was purposely kind of watching interactions and how he dealt with anybody. And unless there was something private, but I never heard of it, even from other, people that were in management, and like, there was just this understanding kind of thing. I'm like, well, I'm not playing that game. If I need something from him, I'm going to him, and until they tell me not to, and it worked out well. So to answer your question, I didn't use it as soon as I probably would have hoped to, but thankfully the learnings from it carried forward, decades later.
That's awesome. I mean, I wish everybody had a chicken pox moment like that, where it just, you really could be, like, you can't ignore the power of that and the result, and you chose to go through with it. And that choice, I don't know, sounds, it's a pretty major choice.
Yeah, it was. From a career standpoint and the work that I do and hosting a show and keynote talks and presentations and launching my own business and being a former healthcare executive, presenting and being responsible for, billion-dollar budgets and all that kind of good stuff. All of that, would in all likelihood not have happened as easily if I didn't have that moment to say, you can do this. Yeah, you look horrible. That's the reality of it. Yeah, own the reality of it. And I think that's one thing that we see a lot too, is people are kind of afraid to own the reality that they may not be good at first at speaking. That's fine. Some of us are naturally born to be really good at it. Some of us, it takes some effort, and it doesn't mean you can't do it. You just like, okay, how do I get to the point where I can? What are the steps? It's like following a recipe. Just how many, grams or ounces of this, what do I need to add for this? And then when you get really good, you go, oh crap, well, I don't have oregano. Well, what other spice could I pair with this that won't ruin the dish? And you play with it, and you might discover a new dish that tastes really good. If not, well, you call up Uber Eats. They'll fix your problem. It's amazing. I love food delivery. It's a great thing. It's like, oh, screw dinner up. All right, let's call them up, or DoorDash or whoever. They should sponsor me. I mentioned them too much on the show. But at the end of the day, again, it goes down to the work that you do, and getting not only your presence on video so you can kind of see yourself. It helps you, again, get more confident. And also, if there's an area that you want to improve, well, guess what? You're going to be able to help those people improve on that. And I think that's the game changer for so many people, because we need people to be better at presenting and sharing their ideas and conveying their messages, their beliefs, what they believe, why they believe it. And this political landscape, and we're always in this world anyway, where there's people saying, it's a lot of yelling and combative talk, but there isn't dialogue, or at least not on camera. And I think if we had dialogue to say, why is this so important to this particular person versus this particular person, their viewpoints, why do you feel this way? And not in a attack the other party or other individual, but why is that important to you? And I think once that gets clear, it kind of brings back the curtains a little bit, and you can say, okay, this is what someone really feels about this. This is why they feel about it, why it's important to them. It may shorten the distance between people. And quite frankly, maybe I'm naive, but I think we have a lot more in common than we have different. And there's polarizing things that cause differences in people, and I get it. But even then, we could talk those things out to find common areas, no matter what the subject matter is. And I think the world would be a whole lot better off if we did that. But it doesn't matter what political flavor you are. So love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, I think there's something there, and what we're talking about, um, obviously over the years, there's been, public speaking classes and certain ways to learn, kind of how to show up. But we're in this world now where the playing field is really even, and anybody can put anything out there. And there's a population of people, like, we're doing this and we're fine putting ourselves out there. But a lot of people are like, I'm not starting a podcast. I'm not going on a podcast. I'm not going to start a YouTube channel. Like, there's a very, there's a lot more people out there who haven't um jumped into this space yet. And I think, it's kind of a competitive advantage that if you're someone who's like, I don't care, I'm just going to do it. I'm confident it doesn't matter where your confidence comes from, but it's there. And I think that there's an opportunity across the board, politically and at every level for people who haven't felt confident putting something out there. They have the feeling everyone's probably got a lot of fire in them right now about a lot of things, but the idea of putting it out there in a constructive way, there's like a barrier there. And I think that if more people could, one, they would learn that whatever that feeling is, no matter what flavor of the emotional spectrum, when it comes out, it's not going to feel how you think it's going to feel. It's like if I could be like full of whatever, like a very intense emotion, if I'm not practiced with this muscle, I'm going to think I'm going to spew fireworks and whatever else, and I'm going to sound like a cat meowing when I open my mouth. And that's, that to me is a hope for people who choose to invest in themselves and practice this skill, because they're like, oh my God, I thought this was going to happen. And when it doesn't happen, that is data back to your brain to be like, okay, I meow like a cat. I was going to say cow. I meow like a cat in this instance. What if I want to come across like someone who cares about this issue? Well, I got to practice to get to that place where I feel comfortable doing it. And then more importantly, sharing it. There are two levels here. There's like seeing yourself, which is where we like to play. And you can spend as much time as you want in that kind of like fitness center, as I like to call it, like go to the gym, build that muscle. But the real, the real prime time like game to put yourself into is like to share it with the world. And like, having a podcast, you're sharing your gift with whoever listens. And I think there's a lot there for people to understand. Sometimes I'm just like, man, is this too pie in the sky, like woo woo? But when people start the journey and they learn something, and then they're like, man, after, I don't know, 4-8 weeks, I want to share myself out there. Like I watch people, I want to get myself in that game. It's very achievable. And I just think if we could get everybody, not everybody, more people on that playing field, it would be an interesting ecosystem to live in.
Yeah, there's voices out there that we have not heard that can literally change the world for the better. And we need those voices out there. So Ryan, love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you, BetterOn, and everything else you're doing?
BetterOn.com. We have a free course if people want to just dip their toe in the water and practice and, record themselves and watch themselves in a private environment. All the videos can be made public. So that's an opportunity there if you want to share your work for feedback from a peer or a boss or a coach, or put it on LinkedIn or something like that. And then Ryan Carey on LinkedIn, you can find me there. And I'd love to chat with anybody who's interested in what we're talking about.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So Ryan, thanks for being you, and thanks for all the amazing work you're doing.
Appreciate it, Mike.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.